Karen Darcy had not been seen in over a month. The last time she'd walked through the doors of Northvale General Hospital, she was wearing the same Navy uniform she had worn for 14 years. That uniform was folded now, locked in a suitcase under a bed in a rented cottage 50 miles away, near the Northumberland coast. To the world, she'd disappeared. To those who knew her, she'd been forced into hiding. She told no one her exact location, not even her husband, who stayed behind in Northvale to protect their home and monitor any strange activity. They spoke once a day on a prepaid phone that she replaced every 2 weeks. The fear had taken root in her like a slow infection, one that no amount of logic could cure. Each time she changed her number, she imagined the faceless people who might still be tracking her, the silent watchers who'd made sure the truth about that hospital never reached daylight. Her mornings were quiet, too quiet. She would wake to the sound of wind against the windows, the low cry of seagulls circling the cliffs, and the hum of her own thoughts. There were days she didn't speak at all. When she did, her voice came out hoarse, unused, foreign. She'd once been a woman who carried authority in operating theaters, who guided junior nurses with confidence. Now, she jumped at the creak of floorboards. On her laptop, she kept a single folder titled Northvale Evidence. Password protected. Inside were scanned copies of her statements, screenshots of deleted hospital messages, and one still image taken from the CCTV footage that had resurfaced before she vanished, the frame that showed the shadowed figure outside the changing room door. Every night before she slept, she'd open that image, stare at the silhouette, and whisper to herself, "You saw me, you knew." But Karen wasn't entirely alone. Somewhere in London, a journalist named Elliot Reeves was piecing together her story. Elliot had first met her at the tribunal, months earlier. He'd been the one to verify the anonymous audio file, the one that had captured the voices discussing how to make sure she doesn't show up. When Karen went missing, he knew why. He had been digging into the hospital's internal record for weeks. What he found unsettled him: overlapping resignations, missing maintenance logs, and payments from a security consultancy that didn't appear on the Trust's public register. The name attached to those payments, Terran and Holt Risk Management, a private firm known for discreet crisis control. Their motto, contain before exposure. When Elliot called their listed number, it disconnected after one ring. He wrote to Karen using an encrypted email client, the same one used by investigative journalists who handled whistleblower leaks. It took her 3 days to reply. Her message was short: "They are still watching. I can feel it." In her cottage, Karen kept a routine. Wake at 6, walk the cliffs, read the news from her old hospital on a burner tablet, drink tea, pretend she wasn't waiting for something terrible to happen. But the isolation did strange things to her mind. Sometimes she'd hear her name whispered in the wind, soft, female, familiar. Sometimes, when she'd open the curtains at night, she'd see a car parked down the lane, headlights off. It would be gone by morning. Sleep was the hardest part. The nightmares came in fragments. The changing room. The voice. "Are you not getting change yet?" Then the smoke. Then darkness. She'd wake drenched in sweat, clutching the edge of the mattress, her throat raw from screaming. One night she dreamed she was back in the tribunal courtroom, only this time every face was blank. No eyes, no mouths, just masks staring at her as she spoke, her voice echoing into silence. When she woke, she could still hear the echo. She told herself it was trauma, but somewhere deep down, a colder thought lingered. What if it wasn't just in her head? Meanwhile, back in Northvale, Elliot Reeves was growing restless. The tribunal had been suspended indefinitely, the official line being administrative review of new evidence. But sources inside the hospital whispered a different story, that an unauthorized data breach had occurred the week Karen fled, and that several internal drives were seized under confidentiality orders. One of those drives, Elliot suspected, was the same one shown in that leaked photo, the hard drive labeled Northvale_sec_logs_August 2023. He reached out to a contact in the IT department, a young technician named Liam Morton who had quietly left the trust 2 months earlier. When he asked if she knew anything about the missing security footage, her voice trembled. "It wasn't deleted," she said. "It was duplicated, then locked in archive storage. They said it was above our clearance." When I asked who gave the order, they said it came from someone outside the trust. Elliot pressed her. Outside? Like who? A firm called Tarrant and Holt. Same ones who handled the incident report after that nurse, Annette, died. The call cut out moments later. When Elliot tried to call back, her number was disconnected. He sat in silence, staring at the blank phone screen. For the first time, he wondered whether Karen's paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. Back in her cottage, Karen felt the walls closing in. Her husband's calls had become shorter, tense. He was worried, not just about her, but about himself. Someone had broken into their garage the week before. Nothing stolen, but the door was left wide open. A silent message. She told him to leave Northvale, to go stay with his sister in Leeds. He refused. If they come for you, he said, they'll have to come through me first. But she knew better. She'd seen what happened to those who tried to help. One evening, she sat by the window, rain blurring the glass, watching headlights move across the horizon. A van slowed near her lane. Stopped, engine idling. She turned off the lamp and waited. Her pulse quickened. Minutes passed. The van drove off. She exhaled. Then she noticed something on her doorstep. A small, black envelope. No postage. No markings. Her hand shook as she picked it up. Inside was a USB stick and a single folded note. You wanted the truth. Be careful. Her stomach turned. She locked every door, closed every curtain, and slid the USB into her laptop. The screen flickered. A single file appeared, Wardroom_cam2.mp4. She hesitated, whispering to herself, not again. Then she pressed play. It was grainy, timestamp September 28, 2023. She saw herself walk into the changing room corridor, just like before. IH followed, but this time, the footage didn't cut off. It continued. Karen felt her chest tighten as she watched her past self freeze near her locker, the panic clear on her face. She could almost feel it again, the shaking, the breath catching in her throat. Then, a new angle appeared. A hidden camera from the opposite wall, one that shouldn't have existed. It captured everything, her fear, RH's stance, the distance between them. But that wasn't what made her gasp. In the corner of the frame, a second figure entered the shot. Not the shadow she'd seen before, but a clear face. A man in a dark suit, watching. She paused the video, zoomed in. She recognized him instantly. It was a Trust Deputy Director of Operations, the same man who had testified under oath that he had no knowledge of the incident. Karen felt her pulse hammering. She pressed play again. The man leaned toward the changing room door, whispered something to someone off camera, then turned and walked away. Seconds later, the footage cut to black. Her laptop screen flickered, then went dark entirely. The USB drive ejected itself. She reached to remove it, but it was hot, too hot to touch. The power in the cottage went out. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. Karen froze. When the lights in the cottage died, Karen Darcy stayed perfectly still. The hum of the refrigerator was gone. The clock on the wall no longer ticked, and the only sound left was her own breathing. She told herself it could be the storm. The wind had been battering the coast all night. Yet she could still hear the slow roll of tires on wet gravel outside, steady, deliberate. She didn't move toward the window. Instead, she crouched low, hands shaking, and waited until the noise faded. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then silence again. She forced herself to stand, lit a candle, and tried the phone. No signal. The power outage might have taken the cell tower too, or something else had. Hours later, when dawn seeped through the curtains, the power returned. The laptop screen blinked to life, but the USB drive lay melted and warped on the table. She wrapped it in foil, slid it into an empty biscuit tin, and buried it in the back garden. She didn't trust the machine anymore. In London, journalist Elliot Reeves woke to a missed call from an unknown number. A voicemail followed, a woman's voice whispering, "She has a drive. Don't let them find her." He replayed it 3 times, then dialed back. Disconnected. By mid-morning, he was on the train to Northumberland. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, not even his editor. He carried a single backpack containing his recorder, spare phone, and a folder of printed notes from the tribunal. On the last page, he'd scribbled the name Liam Morton with a question mark, the technician who'd vanished after revealing the existence of the duplicated footage. When the train rolled into the coastal town nearest Karen's hideout, the wind hit like a slap of ice. He walked a mile to her lane, his collar pulled high, eyes scanning the hedgerows for parked cars. The cottage appeared suddenly between the dunes, a gray speck of slate and salt. Karen answered the door looking smaller than he remembered, her face drawn tight from sleeplessness. She hesitated before letting him in. "You weren't followed?" she asked. He shook his head. "You need to see this," she whispered. She told him everything, the envelope, the video, the blackout. When he asked about the footage, she gestured toward the garden. Together they dug up the tin. The USB was deformed but intact enough for data recovery. He promised to take it to a contact in London who specialized in digital forensics. She gripped his wrist before he left. "If they know you have it, they'll come for you too." He smiled faintly. "That's why I'm not using my name anymore." 2 days later, back in the city, Elliot met his contact in a dim cafe near King's Cross. The man, a cybersecurity analyst called Rafi Singh, examined the damaged device under a portable scanner. "The casing's burned, but the core's fine," he said. "Whoever sent this didn't want it traced." When he extracted the data, 3 encrypted files appeared: Wardroom_cam2, admin_meeting_audio, and staff list_redacted. Rafi decrypted the last one first. It wasn't a list of employees. It was a register of sensitive personnel. Contractors, consultants, private investigators. Besides several names was a short code, T and HOB3. "Tand H," Elliot muttered. "Taryn and Holt." Rafi clicked open the audio file. The hiss of a microphone filled the speakers, then a woman's voice. "Meeting begins, 16th October. Papers rustled. Another voice, male, calm, precise. "We've secured all copies of the footage. Only one duplicate remains, under lock in Central Archive. Contingency required if tribunal proceeds." Then another voice, lower, impatient. "What about the nurse?" A pause. "She'll settle or vanish. Either works." Elliot felt his stomach knot. He pressed stop. "Can you trace where this was recorded?" Rafi frowned. "It's been scrubbed, but there's background noise, traffic, sirens. Sounds like central London." They sat in silence, the hum of the cafe blending with a faint buzz from the speakers. Elliot left with a drive in his pocket and a new fear blooming behind his ribs. The conspiracy wasn't confined to the hospital. It reached further, into private contractors, maybe even public officials who prefer a quiet resolution. That night he sent Karen a brief message. Confirmed. They planned everything. Stay inside. She read it twice, then deleted it. The days blurred. Karen kept the curtains closed, slept in boasts. Sometimes she thought she heard movement outside at night, the crunch of boots, a tap against a window. But when she looked, there was only darkness. The paranoia was a constant companion now, as real as the damp in the walls. She started writing notes to herself, reminders of small truths. "You are safe for now. You are not crazy. They did this." One morning she turned on the radio to drown the silence. The local news mentioned the hospital again. The trust had announced an internal restructuring after the departure of several senior figures, including the deputy director of operations. Official reason: health grounds. Karen knew better. She tried calling Elliot, but his number went straight to voicemail. Then, 3 nights later, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, London postmark. Inside, a single photograph printed on glossy paper. It showed Elliot standing outside the cafe, unaware, talking to Rafi. Across the bottom, in black marker, "Stop digging." She burned the photo in the sink and watched the ashes swirl down the drain. Elliot, meanwhile, had gone to ground. After retrieving the audio and partial footage from Rafi, he'd noticed men following him near his flat, unmarked cars, faces that looked away too quickly. He moved between hostels, paying cash, carrying the data on an encrypted drive hidden inside the lining of his jacket. He managed one secure call to his editor. "If something happens to me, He said, "Check the archives under Wardroom. Everything's there." The line clicked, static filled his ear, and the call died. That same night, Ruffy's office was broken into. Nothing stolen, except a computer that had decrypted the files. Back on the coast, Karen's mental state frayed further. She began keeping a journal, not for therapy but as evidence. Each entry started with the same line: "If they find me, tell the truth." She described every noise, every shadow, every stranger who walked too slowly past her gate. Reading it back each morning, she tried to separate imagination from memory and failed. Then, one rainy evening, a knock came at the door. Soft, polite. Her first thought was Elliot, but when she looked through the peephole, she saw a woman, mid-30s, hair-soaked, holding an ID badge. Karen cracked the door an inch. "Ms. Darcy? My name's Leah Morton." Karen's breath caught. The missing technician. Leah looked exhausted. "They think I'm dead," she said. "I need to tell you what's on that drive." Karen let her in, bolted the door, and listened as Leah explained. The archive footage wasn't the only copy. Before leaving the trust, she'd backed up entire weeks of security logs. They showed more than the changing room. They showed meetings, hallway footage, and something else: storage rooms being accessed at night by people not on payroll. They were using the hospital for something, Leah said, but I don't know what. When I asked, my access was revoked. The next day, my flat was trashed. That's when I ran. Karen felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Do you still have the copies?" Leah nodded. "Hidden, but we need help. Someone who can go public." Karen hesitated. "Elliot Reeves." Leah shook her head. "His missing." Karen drove through the night with Leah in the passenger seat, the wipers clawing at sheets of rain. They didn't speak much. Every car behind them looked suspicious. Every service station felt like a trap. They reached a small town outside York before dawn and rented a room under false names. Leah booted up her old laptop and connected an external drive. Folders appeared, dozens, each labeled with dates. Karen's fingers hovered above the touchpad as the videos loaded one by one. In one clip, a group of men in suits walked through the hospital basement, past the medical waste storage area. One carried a briefcase. Another flashed an ID-marked government liaison. In another video, technicians unloaded sealed containers into a restricted lab wing that didn't exist on any floor plan. The timestamps matched the week after Karen's incident. Leah whispered, "They built something down there. Off books." Karen watched in silence. The faces on screen were calm, methodical, indifferent. She realized then that her encounter in the changing room might have been less a random invasion of privacy and more a spark that threatened to expose a much larger secret. That was why they wanted her silent. And somewhere out there, Elliot Reeves had vanished trying to prove it.